you, and good morning, everybody. And I really would like to welcome you all to today's event. Can I just tell you that I'm coming in remotely from Ahabog in County Monaghan. And I can tell you to some, this would be very remote, but for me, it's home. So it's great that I'm able to join you from here this morning. So this is the first of my department's Rural Ideas Fora. It's a series of 3 online events which will allow people to come together and discuss the challenges and the opportunities facing rural communities. These events over the coming weeks will continue the direct engagement that began last March when I launched the government's rural development policy, Our Rural Future. And Our Rural Future, of course, is the most ambitious policy for rural Ireland in decades, and it's already having a very positive impact in communities the length and breadth of the country. These ideas Fora are an important commitment in Our Rural Future. It's giving our rural stakeholders and our citizens an opportunity to exchange ideas on how we can continue to make rural Ireland a better place to live, work, and raise a family. Today's discussion centres around remote working, the golden opportunity it provides to change people's lives for the better. And I understand that there was a great demand for today's event, which clearly shows the huge interest there is in this topic. 20 months ago, as we all know, remote working was a concept. And today it's an everyday reality for tens of thousands of people. We've already seen the positive impact that the shift to remote or connected working brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic has had on people's lives. And I really mean it when I say this. Remote working has provided us with a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reimagine that what working in rural Ireland actually means. And in conjunction with the rollout of the National Broadband Plan, remote working has the potential to have a truly transformative impact. Our Rural Future, of course, places an emphasis on the potential for remote working to enable more people to live and work in rural areas, no matter where their employer is headquartered, because by giving people the choice to work from their own local communities, we can revitalise our town centres and reverse population decline by not just retaining people, but actually attracting people back into rural areas. We can also reduce commuting times, lower transport emissions, and most importantly, improve the quality of life of our people. The recent announcement of the National Development Plan is another sign of our commitment to realising the level of ambition in our rural future. And it sets out an unprecedented level of investment that will make a real and lasting impact on rural Ireland over the coming years. Now, my department continues to invest significantly in remote working infrastructure, in the development of new hubs, and improvements to existing hubs around the country so we can support workers' needs. I launched the Connected Hubs in May, along with the launch of the Connected Hubs online platform. And this platform offers a suite of booking, hub management, and e-commerce applications to members. The network will facilitate the sharing of innovation, experience, and best practices across the community. So far, more than 425 remote working hubs have been identified, and all will be invited to join the Connected Hubs network, which has the potential, I believe, to be a game changer when it comes to remote working. I recently announced almost €9 million in Connected Hubs funding to improve existing hubs and broadband connection points right across the country. I have visited many of these hubs, most recently the facility in Stranorlar in County Donegal. And I can tell you that the feedback I got from people who use these hub facilities was second to none. They spoke to me about how working from a digital hub has changed their lives for the better. One lady that was working there, she has moved her family back to Donegal, where she's from. She was working for a multinational in Dublin. And now she's able to have the support of her extended family in Donegal when you're rearing a family, which of course that is very important. better quality of life, and she's absolutely delighted. There was another guy, he comes over 3 or 4 months every year. He's working for a bank in London. He comes to look after his elderly mother. He spends 3 months in the remote working hub and then goes back to London for another 3 months. So that's really how we can improve people's quality of life, and so they can spend more time with their family. And that's what remote and hybrid working is all about, is making things easier for people to have a meaningful career opportunities and still live where they choose to live. Because for decades, we have been witness to young people leaving their local communities to live and work in larger cities. For decades, we had a situation where a parent might only spend time with their children on a Saturday afternoon, because by the time they got home in the evening, bedtime had already come and gone. And I don't believe that that needs to be the reality anymore. We now have a non-precedented opportunity to change the status quo for good. As I've said before, the biggest mistake we can make now as we emerge from the pandemic is to go back to the old normal. So in conclusion, I am committed as Minister to ensuring that our rural future continues to be closely linked to the views of people across Ireland, and this series of Rural Ideas Fora is an important part of that ongoing process. And I'm delighted that Andrew Ford from my department is here on the line as well today, because I know Andrew has put a huge amount of work into developing our rural future. And I really do look forward to today's discussions and hearing your feedback on this very important topic. So thank you all very much for joining us this morning, and enjoy the discussion. And please come forward with your ideas. We want to hear your ideas. None of us has a monopoly on good ideas, and I can do my job better when I get good suggestions from all of you people on this call here. So thank you very much, and Goramila Makov.
Thank you so much, Minister, for that energised opening and that real call for our ideas, for our views, for an open conversation together. So I think that leads us on very well to now hearing from St John O'Connor. St John is the Principal Officer of the in charge of rural development innovation in the department. So St John, I will just bring you up here.
Thanks, Ali.
And invite you to speak now.
So good morning, everybody. I see a good few names that I'm very familiar with. Apologies, I'm hotspotting this morning because even in the city centre of Dublin, the Wi-Fi can let you down. So apologies if you can't see me at this stage. So as Ali said, I head up the Regional Development and Innovation Unit in the department. Our unit has been in existence, predates in fact the department, for about 5 years. Our remit is around rolling out telecommunications infrastructure and increasing the uptake of digital technologies more generally speaking. We do that largely through working with stakeholders such as the local authorities. We co-fund a broadband officer in each of the local authorities. We work with our colleagues in Department of Communications and Industry and other state bodies on the mobile phone and broadband task force. And that gives us a sort of a good view of what's happening out there on the ground. But I think I'd maybe just, the Minister was looking for practical ideas coming out of today, and that's something that resonates very clearly with ourselves. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, and I'll hopefully give us a few pointers for the plenary session discussion, but also the breakout sessions as well. So just to say, our rural future really does set the context for everything we do in our unit, particularly around the sustainable economic, social and environmental piece. I think that remote working work stream that we have really does provide a unique opportunity, both from an economic perspective, but also from a social perspective. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move on. The policy itself, really, today I'm just going to cover off maybe some of the key aspects as I see it drawn from the policy, which is around access to high-speed broadband, which is the key enabler, the remote working piece, and then the revitalization piece, which rural hubs will hopefully deliver as well. So I think it's useful just to mention, just to see the scale of the investment. I mean, our rural future is not just a plan with policies and measures. There's a significant amount of money backing it through the National Development Plan, such as the Project Ireland 2040 funds, the significant amount that's being spent on rolling out high-speed broadband, and a large portion of that is actually being spent in rural areas. And then if you look at what we're spending on the creation of a national remote working network, we certainly over the last 18 months clearly spent more than 10 million euro already, with the promise of more. So just to start off, really, I've included this slide just because I think it's always useful just to go back to basics in terms of just understanding the path that we're on when we talk about rural digital connectivity and the underpinning factors. The National Broadband Plan is the single largest infrastructure project that the state has ever undertaken, and it's doing that through the course of a pandemic. You know, you're stringing fiber across over 100,000 kilometers of road, which is just a mind-boggling number. But also, as anybody knows, if you're driving down rural roads, you'll see telephone poles leaning at sort of various stages of falling over. All of those poles have to be replaced or repaired. So that's hundreds of thousands of poles have to be replaced as part of this project. But probably most important, and when I think about, you know, the remote working piece and high-speed broadband, and I talk about digital technologies, really what I think about is the 44,000 businesses, small businesses that are the centre and economic drivers of many communities in rural Ireland, and which are also owned in many cases by family businesses. We've all seen, even before the pandemic, that footfall through a large number of doorways is getting less and less, and therefore the delivery of high-speed broadband is an economic enabler for those businesses. We need to bring them online, we need to equip them and train them, and programs such as the Department of Communications Trading Online Voucher Scheme is hugely important in that respect. Now, look, I think it's fair to say the last couple of years have been challenging for everybody, including rolling out the National Broadband Plan. I think I would look at it, we're involved in what I would consider the sort of pointy end of the National Broadband Plan in terms of delivering 300 broadband connection points, which I'll talk about in a little bit of detail. But there is progress being made, more generally speaking. It's probably a little bit slower than we would have liked, but by the end of the year, we will have passed over 60,000 premises. So that's a huge achievement. And more importantly than that, it's just that ramping up phase is now really hitting its straps at this point. And by the end of 2023, 60% of rural premises in the intervention area are going to be passed by high-speed broadband. And more importantly, that commitment by National Broadband Ireland of increasing the minimum threshold to 500 megabits is hugely positive. I know I would personally welcome 500 megabits in the centre of Dublin City. But just moving on, so the Broadband Connection Point Initiative is a really interesting part of the National Broadband Plan, because recognising that a lot of locations weren't going to receive high-speed broadband until the sort of tail end of the rollout, the government identified, you know, that we needed to bring high-speed broadband into communities. So working with local authorities, working with Department of Communications, MBI, we identified 300 of these public access BCPs across the country. We've connected about 220 of those, with the rest hopefully to be collected before the end of the year. In fact, the vast majority will be connected before the end of the year. And what these are really important in the context of today's discussion is because when we started out on this journey maybe 3 years ago in terms of identifying the locations, we probably had about between 8 and 10 locations that were looking to offer remote working. And as a result, we designed a technological solution that was based upon a very few number of locations needing to offer that service. Then COVID hit, and we had to pivot literally midstream and provide a different technological solution. And in fairness, our partners in Vodafone were very good in pivoting with us in that. And now we probably have between 70 and 100 of those 300 broadband connection points who are either currently offering remote working opportunities for the community or who have expressed an interest in doing so in the future. And it's really interesting because our view of this piece of work is that the infrastructure is yes, it's really difficult and really complex and something that hasn't been achieved before. But in actual fact, it's not even the most important element of it. The most important element is once we have the connectivity, what are we going to do with it? How are communities going to benefit? What are the opportunities? So we've built a portal that sits on top of the broadband connection points. We're inviting communities to register, site managers to register, and we'll deliver a program, a suite of training and services through that mechanism. So for example, we've already had very successful online painting classes done in multiple BCPs at the same time. We've had people learning the uilleann pipes. We have a film festival going to kick off in December, which is something really exciting. And then we have a whole suite of training programs, including on remote working, that are due to kick off very, very shortly. And once you're registered on the portal, if you haven't already, My Connected Community, you'll be able to sign up and get alerts. And all of that training is free. So the broadband connection point and everything I'm going to talk about a little bit around the development of the National Hub Network is all contextualized within the National Remote Work Strategy. I think it's a really targeted, focused document that provides that framework for us to operate. And really two actions stand out: the creation of the network, but also the raising awareness and use of the network. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. So, as the Minister has said in her opening remarks, the survey, we launched a survey on the 22nd of February. That was actually predicated on two things. It started off probably about 18 months ago with a very small project for between 4 local authorities, the WDC, Deirdre Frost and Johnny Gorman and my team, to pull that together as a sort of a very small network. Because it was so successful, the idea was sort of escalated to the whole Atlantic Economic Corridor region, which, as you can see in the map there, goes from County Donegal in the north down to Kerry in the south. And then COVID hit and we had to respond to that, and the Minister wanted us to scale that nationally. So that's what we did. The WDC released, I suppose, a call to action in February. We got over 500 responses to that survey, and of which 425 have now been mapped. So if you want to see each of the locations, you can go on to connectedhubs.ie. And as the Minister said, we have 146 hubs live on the system as we speak. Now, all of our focus really between ourselves and the WDC, Stephen and Pauline and the crew down there, has been just to drive the number of hubs onto the network so that we had a critical mass and we had a sort of a good geographical distribution across the country. Our focus is going to pivot now, and that's something that I'd like us to discuss, is where do we need to pivot to and what are the things that we need to do next. So what's really interesting from this perspective, and maybe something for people to have a think about, is the work that Stephen and Pauline have done around this hub classification model, because nobody had a view, nobody could see what was out there prior to this mapping exercise, but we also didn't really understand what are the nature of the services and what are the types of hubs that are being offered. So identifying this classification model, be it an enterprise hub, community hubs, co-working hubs, etc., it gives us a view of what's out there, and it gives us an ability to be able to target specific investments where we see gaps emerging. So hopefully this data set will become very useful from both a central government and a local authority perspective, so that we can target specific investments. We can see what's in each economic area, and we can say, well, look, maybe we have too many co-working hubs, or maybe we have too many community hubs, and maybe we actually need more enterprise hubs or scaling hubs. Because what we want to see is that journey, no matter how big or small your business is, there is a pathway for that business's journey or the growth of that enterprise through the hub network, and that you don't have to relocate out of your economic region in order to grow and scale your business. So really interesting and exciting data set that's starting to emerge. If you haven't been on connectedhubs.ie, I would encourage you all to do so. I just included this slide just to show you how easy it is to search either by date or by location. And as I said, there's plenty of locations that are available on connectedhubs.ie. So one of the things we did, and one of the things the Minister did more specifically, was to run a Connected Hubs call this year. And as the Minister said, we've distributed approximately 9 million to 285 hubs and BCPs through that call. And that call was really interesting from a couple of perspectives, because firstly, it was open to commercial and non-commercial, and that was a bit of a departure for the department. So that was something new, that was a bit of a learning for ourselves, but it's been hugely positive, because in our view, the network is only as strong as its members. So we need to get all of the hubs up to a certain standard. And I know NASEC is working with WDC around building out that standardized framework, which is hugely positive. But in our view, anything that was going to add capacity or quality to the user experience of a hub was something to be funded. And like things that we have funded is podcast studios, new office pods, roofs, windows, doors, toilets, kitchens, everything that improves a user experience. Because what I would like to see the network developing into, no matter which hub you go into, there was a certain minimum standard, and that's from the environment, the look and the feel, but also the facilities that are available there. So that's something that we're working very carefully on. So my last slide is really just to tee up the discussion. We're hoping for very practical, very pragmatic solutions to come out of today. As the Minister says, we certainly don't have a monopoly on good ideas for the Connected Hubs network. We want to hear what you're saying. We have a large number of hubs that are in the pipeline to be connected over the next couple of months, and certainly, hopefully by the end of this year, we'll have 200 plus hubs online. We have a mobile app which is due for imminent launch, I would say, and that, again, hopefully that's going to drive activity into the network. Liam and the crew down at the WDC are doing really excellent community building sessions every fortnight. I've attended, I've presented to a couple of those. I can see the quality of the dialogue and engagement that's going on. It's really good as a means of me touching in and engaging with people on the network. So hopefully that will continue. I think that community building piece is one of the key elements of the network. How do hub managers help other hub managers? How do we stop reinventing the wheel? How do we do things better and cheaper and quicker? Also, I touched upon that memo of understanding with NASEC. I think that's hugely positive. There's also Cisco in there, have a partnership, and one of the BCPs and one of the hubs that I was actually out on Friday in Clare Island, Cisco are involved in developing out an e-health suite for that, which is really, really exciting. We have a national and local media campaign set for release later this month. That's going to be very much driving two things in the first instance, awareness of the hub network and awareness of local hubs. So there's a lot of local targeted advertising there, but also we hope that it's going to drive increased activity, because as I said, everything to this point in time has been very much about getting the hubs on. Now we're shifting focus. Now we're focusing on driving activity. And then something which is probably over the medium term, which is very, very exciting, is this corporate account management piece. This is something we see having great growth opportunity, whereby the network as a whole would enter into relationships with large corporate clients, and therefore that economic benefit of that would trickle down, because we know a lot of hubs don't have the capability to engage with the likes of the big corporates. So maybe we can do that centrally, and that takes it away, but gives that increased economic opportunity to those hubs. So I'll leave that there. That's effectively me done. If anybody has any questions, they can contact me there. I'll post my email address into the chat. But certainly, hopefully, I've given you some ideas for the discussion. And again, we are very encouraged to try and take away some really practical steps out of today. So that's me done.
Thank you so much, St John. It's just such a clear account, and exciting to hear everything that's been happening, particularly in the face of many challenges. So yes, we will, as St John said, I'm sure there could be questions, thoughts, reflections arising. And just to say, after our panel discussion and some smaller group conversations, we will have a chance for maybe some short responses from the different speakers today near the end. So there'll be more space for that as well. But with that, I would like to move into the next part of our forum this morning, which is to really hear from 4 leaders who have direct experience of the development of remote working in this country, either directly involved in it or experiencing it. Their organization is part of it. So I would like to introduce each of those panel members now. And first of all, let me just check I can see each person here on screen. So first of all, I would I'm very happy to introduce Tomas Osiakan. So Tomas is the CEO of the Western Development Commission, and so that's an agency that was actually set up by the government to focus on the west of Ireland, and is promoting the region as a whole, providing policy analysis. There's a regional investment fund, and particularly relevant to this is leading on the development and rollout of our national hubs network. So welcome, Tomas.
Thanks, Ali.
Thank you, great to have you here. So our next member of the panel is Hazel Mitchell. Hazel is leading eBay's customer service delivery teams for North America and Australia, all based out of here in Ireland. She also launched eBay at Home in 2017, which was a remote working model itself, which saw the company hire employees across Ireland, which really became a fundamental aspect of eBay's response to what's happened in the last years with the pandemic. So Hazel, we're so glad to have you with us today.
Thank you.
And then our next panel member is Trish Walsh. So Trish, let me bring you up here. So let me see. So here we are. So Trish is leading at the Henri Enterprise Centre in South Sligo, and I think you have a lot of direct experience to share, Trish, on your experience of really sort of moving into setting up remote working spaces in your area. So we look forward to hearing the direct experience of that.
Thank you.
Welcome, Trish. And then finally, I'd like to introduce Laura Tanyan. So welcome, Laura. Laura's managing ForgeWorks in Gort, and also you're a chapter leader with Grow Remote. And so I think there's a lot of, again, experiences that you have there at ForgeWorks and in your involvement with Grow Remote that you can share with us today. Welcome, Laura.
Thanks for having me.
Great, so this is a rather exciting panel to have, and I think what I'd like to do to start off with is just, I mean, I've already sort of alluded to it in the opening here, which is I don't think any of us will forget the last year or two that we have all been through. And that's very much a part of not only our personal lives, but our working lives. So I'd like to put a question to each of you in the panel, and we'll maybe just ask you each to respond in turn in the order that you've joined the panel. Is, you know, what is your biggest takeaway from the pandemic, and how are you applying that to how you now move forward within your organization, within your hub? So perhaps over to you, Tomas, first.
Thanks, Ali. I think, first of all, in the context of remote work, we would have seen as part of the work that the Western Development Commission has done, particularly in the policy space over an extended period of time, that this is something that has been coming. So the initial, the changes in technology, perhaps 10 years ago, the advent of the iPhone and everything that flowed from it, allowed people to work remotely. The second aspect was the increasing awareness of the climate crisis. So that meant that people were very conscious of an awful lot of the huge commutes that people were doing. And that also fed into the quality of life that people felt, you know, they were living to work rather than working to live. But for me, the biggest change over the last 18 months or 2 years has been the employer mindset. Because even as an employer, very often the situation has been where somebody says, you know, let's have a look at remote work. You go, that could work, yeah. But, you know, is it really going to work for us? And I think what we've had over the last 18 months is, first of all, a global real-time experiment to identify where remote work works well. Equally, it has identified areas where remote work doesn't work well. So it's been very informative from our point of view in the Western Development Commission, particularly, I think, in the snapshots we've taken in our work with NUI Galway around the National Remote Work Survey, because some of the things that we've identified is very much fed into the work that both the Minister and St. John highlighted in terms of connected hubs. So the disadvantages and advantages of remote work. So I think all of that is much more to the fore over the last 18 months. But equally, the most important thing across the board is the realization that remote work does work in a huge number of cases. And the final point I'd make is that, particularly in the context of the hubs network, that remote work does not mean working in your bedroom or in your kitchen. So that there is a third way, or that there is another opportunity to have an office type setup on your doorstep. And we see that as hugely important in terms of the development of local communities as economic drivers in regional and rural communities.
Thank you, Tomas. Maybe, yeah, we'll keep going around. Hazel, how about for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I couldn't agree more. I think we had launched a remote working program in 2017. And back then, I think our approach was really to do that, to try and tap into the incredible pool of talent that we knew existed right across Ireland in all of towns and communities that you would know yourselves. And we really believed that location shouldn't restrict career opportunity, and we wanted to be able to tap into that talent. But that response was actually fundamental to that playbook that we created as part of that remote working was fundamental to our eBay global response to the COVID-19 challenges. And we were so lucky that the Irish team, I think, had launched work from home, because we had a playbook and a model that we were able to use really quickly to make sure that we got our employees home safe with their families, but also back online, which was vital when our customers needed us most. So the learnings that we had were really fundamental to help us to actually deliver for the business at pace and without interruption to our operations. We're really fortunate that we had that. What I would say I've seen a huge change in, if you think about our learnings through the pandemic, is that we certainly have seen a shift in our employee mindset. And everyone, I think, globally is rethinking how they live and how they work and what's important and what work-life balance they want. And what we're hearing from our team is that flexibility is key, choice is key. And a large number of our employees now have chosen that even when the pandemic is over, they're going to continue to work from home. But I think we're still working through a lot of the solutions, and there is not one solution that works for every single person. Some people don't necessarily have the setup, as Tomas mentioned earlier. So it's very important for us that we keep learning and we keep iterating, and we're part of these type of initiatives so that we can build a solution that works well for our entire team and works well to help sustain communities across Ireland, which is our focus as we go forward.
Wow, thank you, Hazel. And yeah, just amazing to that sort of premonition, that preparatory work of setting up the remote working at home, eBay at home in advance really served you well, doesn't it? It's incredible to hear that. So moving over to you, Trish, what would you say for you?
Yeah, well, I was thinking back to in 2019 when Tubbercurry, as the first smart community, hosted an international remote working conference with 150 delegates. And I was one of those, and I was working in the private sector at the time. And I remember trying to bring on board my employer at the time to say, can we look at this? Is this an option? And it really did prove challenging. And I know even for myself, I had this mindset that it's probably just for an elite skill set. I don't know how it's going to work. And so obviously when March 2020 kicked in and we got over the shock that, okay, we're not closing for 2 weeks, this is going to be a little bit longer. Remote working wasn't just a concept anymore. We were living it and we were trying to work with it. And so now that I'm a hub manager with Uncree, I can see how valuable it is that we look at all forms of remote working. And I love the idea of the hybrid model. I think it's a win-win, so that we don't end up with the same issues. Well, they're different issues, but the same stresses and strains of constantly working in an office versus constantly working at home. So I love that idea of that hybrid model where you can change accordingly, be on site, work from home. And I think hubs are going to play a huge part in that.
Thank you for bringing that in, Trish. Okay, well, let's just end to hear now from you, Laura. What came up for you from this last period?
I just think it's a fantastic opportunity for rural Ireland. There about 6 months ago on LinkedIn, there was 55,000 jobs in the European Economic Area. I checked it today and there's now over 100,000 jobs. And with people here in Gort, a lot of the jobs were very high tech jobs. So we did a little bit more digging, and again on LinkedIn, I checked today, there's 37,000 level entry jobs available in our area. So it's absolutely massive. It's a huge opportunity for people, but there is a piece around training. I'm just concerned that technology is changing so fast that people might get left behind if they don't adapt with the changing times.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, I guess this. Thank you so much to everyone. And yeah, our initial learnings is kind of leading me into the question of, okay, so then what next? What does this mean? We've learned, it sounds like there's been an incredible amount of agility and fluidity over the last year and a half, but how, and I loved what you were saying, Trish, about the kind of celebrating the hybrid working model that can work. And then as Tomas said, but it isn't necessarily in your bedroom. And I resonated with that. As I maybe said to some people on arrival, I'm here in an amazing workspace up in County Louth, and for exactly that reason, that I need a space with great provision so that I can do the work that I do. So maybe just to ask each of you now, maybe from you, obviously we're coming from different perspectives, different organizational roles, but how do we need to kind of set up our organizations to really make hybrid working work? what's the changes we need to make going forward, or you're planning to make, to really make hybrid working a true reality with optimum results. So maybe coming to you, Tomas, if there's a way you could relate to that and in your role.
Thanks, Ali. Well, from our point of view at the Western Development Commission, we would have had a tradition of remote working. There's when we looked at our policy, and again, pre-pandemic, as Hazel had done, we discovered that there was a telework policy, as it was known then, that went all the way back to 2003. But obviously things have changed. So one of the things that we addressed was, I think, the two key issues, and I think this applies not only to us as an organization, but virtually all organizations. One is to avoid a situation where somebody feels that because they're out of sight, they're out of mind, so that they don't have the same access to opportunity for progression or access to, let's say, opportunities within work. And I think two groups in particular are most at risk, and they're the key groups that we should focus on. So those that are starting off in their career, new entrants, because they're at the stage where they're building these informal networks that we all have, no matter what job that we do, and that they're of huge use to you as you progress throughout your career. Equally, you're learning a huge amount, and probably the most effective way to do that is sit beside somebody or near somebody where you can just lean over and say, I don't understand this, how do I do this? So I think that's really important. I think equally for those that are in mid-career who perhaps are looking for a promotion or the next step up, what's really important is that they don't feel that they're being isolated. So I think and this I would highlight as the second major challenge that is addressable, but that we should be conscious of it, is to ensure that it doesn't only relate to certain cohorts. And I think in particular that there are certain, let's say, young parents, perhaps women in particular, that this may be seen as something that applies majoritively to them. And in that situation, that can become very damaging if it's associated with a certain cohort. So to give you a practical example from our point of view within the organization, the WDC we've now moved, during the summer, our board supported the move to what's called a remote first model. What does that mean? That means that all meetings take place remotely unless we agree otherwise. And we all commit to meeting as a staff once a month, and then each team commits to meeting in person once a fortnight. And that was driven largely by the experience we've had. We had a working group over the last 9 months to say, what are the areas we should tackle? The key thing from my point of view, and particularly as a manager in an organization, is communication. You have to over communicate. So we use a number of different channels to tell people what's happening. And we do that almost on an ongoing basis and overcompensate to make sure that people are aware of what's happening. So that's the key thing. And the reason this remote first approach, we're very keen to use it, is that it means that where you have a situation where 5 people are in a meeting, you don't have the decision that 2 are remote and 3 are in the office, that the 2 that are remote feel isolated or somehow at a disadvantage. So it's to create that parity of esteem or that level playing field. And I think that's crucial, and certainly that's been our experience to date.
Wow, Tomas, thank you so much. This is fantastic examples of how to really support this within an organization. And I love the clarity and also the inclusion of the remote first strategy. Often, so far as we're moving into these new times, it's often not named and it becomes very confusing or people get excluded, but also recognizing, I personally feel that at least an in-person meeting with some regularity is also so essential just for joining together. And I think you really highlighted ultimately the importance of communicating with each other, and particularly at certain stages in our career. Thanks so much. Hazel, how about for you? Where next? How do you really make this work in your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to echo a lot of what Tomas said. I mean, the first thing I think actually was Grow Remote that helped us guide us very early on to have a virtual first mindset. And so we virtualized every single experience. If it couldn't be virtualized, then it just didn't happen, from onboarding to training to our engaging, our parties, and any type of team meeting, any type of engagement. And that was very, very important, I think, because exactly to Tomas's point, you don't want to leave somebody behind. And when we took a virtual first mindset, it really helped us to solve for those groups. I think a couple of other things I would say is transparency. We had to help people understand what virtual working was and what it wasn't, and what success looked like in that role and what you needed to invest to make it successful, and also to be very transparent as to what we could facilitate and what we couldn't. So it was really important, I think, everyone knew their role, how it contributed to the business, and how we celebrated when things went right. There are a couple of key things, and I think Laura mentioned it earlier. Technology is changing, and it's changing each and every day. And using the right platforms for communicating and working together, and creating the opportunity to have face-to-face meetings, whether they be Zoom or on the phone, whatever works well for somebody, but creating that opportunity to do it, not just for a purposeful driven meeting, but just I want to catch up, or I want to check in, or I want to ask a question. So what are the different opportunities, and making sure they're very clear and transparent for people. I think the other piece I would say is your leaders need to be very much engaged with it, and need to be trained on how to effectively manage and coach and onboard in a virtual world, and making sure that they can react quickly, and they can ensure they're checking in on their team. Because if something is going wrong and you're at home by yourself, or you're working from a hub by yourself, it can be very lonely. It can be a very lonely experience if you don't have somebody to be able to turn around and look for support, or that you don't have the people around you. So I think developing that strong culture and continuous and regular communication is really important, that people feel part of the team, and they know where to go if they need any help, that there are the right listening posts to gather that feedback and to make sure that we're learning from it. And that'll be the biggest thing I would say. The biggest learning is recognize your mistakes, build on those learnings, iterate quickly. I mean, there's certainly things that we did and launched and we thought that's not working, it's not having the impact that we expected. And we really had to encourage our team, tell us what works, tell us what's not working, especially in the early days. And we've been able to build out those models. And employee needs are changing, and they will continue to change. So I think be just open and have a growth mindset around it, and really try to ensure that you're building the right solution. That's what we're trying to do, to make sure that we're building the right solution to set our team up for success.
Wow, thank you, Hazel. I felt that's a real example of what I picked up as this real agility of your approach in leading the work you're doing in eBay, but just that's how it is hear the feedback and then change quickly. And I would say that's the one thing about working online is quick changes are absolutely possible if we're willing to do it. And the other thing I really took out was this sense of, in a way, there can be two essential purposes, both of value. One is the content of the work we're working on, but the other is checking in, connecting. And I certainly know for myself that the virtual coffee over the course of the pandemic has been an absolutely nourishing, supportive thing, and that could be taking place in our organizations and systems as well. So thank you. Okay, so moving on to Trish. Trish, I brought in this the approach of hybrid working when you were speaking earlier. Just what would you say? How does that need to be set up kind of for success?
Yeah, well, I suppose I see the role of the hub, like Tomas alluded to there, when people are starting out and they need to network and they need to be around people. If you are in a remote working job, I think it's fantastic to have an opportunity to go to a building as such as a social enterprise centre, and connect with other people purely from the basic human level of social interaction. And I take it very responsibly that part of my job as a hub manager is to ensure that that social interaction is there, that we are meeting for a cup of coffee, that I am engaging with them, because I have seen it when there aren't hub managers in place, where potentially it's an empty building. You're walking in, you're sitting, you have access, you're sitting by a desk, or you're sitting in an office, and it can be quite isolating, as can completely working from home. So my take on it is that we're here, that you get that feeling of that office experience, that sense of connection, but I'm not your boss at the end of the day. So I can have a smile and a laugh, and I can hear your concerns or your worries. And I think we'll offer a very valuable service in that respect. And judging by the amount of hubs that are part of the network and will be spread across the country, I think there will be one nearly on everybody's doorstep to avail of, and to factor in all those stresses and strains that are involved with an element of remote working or traveling for 2 hours to be at a particular head office. So I'm hoping we'll be able to help with that.
Thanks so much, Trish. Wow, you've just described somehow the perfect, the caring leader that's not actually your boss, but no offense to our bosses, we love them too. But yeah, I certainly know for myself. And I was thinking about how we're all in different circumstances. As Tomas said, someone might be a parent, or they might have a whole family at home. For myself, I live alone. So when I'm also remote working, it can be very, very isolating, and a hub can be an absolutely essential community working space. So Laura, how about for you in response to this? We already heard of the great support from Grow Remote, but yeah, how could organizations really set up hybrid working for success?
Well, what we did in Gort, we surveyed our remote workers, and Ballinasloe did as well. And the main results came out of that was people were suffering from isolation. So we got some funding from Grow Remote, and we're running events for remote workers. So last month we brought them on a guided walk of Gort and brought in some locals as well, and we had some refreshments afterwards, and we're doing it in Portumna and Ballinasloe in the next couple of months. Yeah, people want flexibility. They want to be able to go to a hub. They want to work from home, and some want to go to the office. So I think employers just being flexible with their employees is the best route down the remote hybrid way.
Thanks, Laura. And maybe that does lead me into the next thing I think I'd actually just put out again to everyone, which is just, I think you're pointing to, I'd already started to mention myself this, we're experiencing many things in this time, like it's really an unprecedented time that we have gone through. And this is fantastic that as organizations, we can be agile, we can learn quickly, we can restructure. But what about sort of at the individual level for each of us and for the teams that we may be responsible for? So it's this point of going through such a major societal change has caused many people to actually reevaluate what they want from their lives, their personal lives, their working lives, and so on. And particularly as we may be moving into the next phase and somewhat sort of post-pandemic. So how do each of you see that? Is that something you've picked up in your teams? What implication does that really have? And how do we, there's a lot of turbulence, there's a lot of, that brings up a lot for each of us as an individual and for the people we're working with. How do we navigate that? So maybe to you first again, Tomas.
Thanks, Ali. I think that is a challenge. I think, first of all, I think you're right. There's been a huge period of change. And I think then we're looking at moving into a huge period of change. I would agree with what Hazel has said. Let's say we have put a remote work policy in place at the moment, but I do expect elements of that to change, because I think for it to work, we'll have to try it, test it, see what's working well, see what isn't working well. But I think more broadly, albeit in the context that people will experience change, and that can be difficult for some people, there are huge opportunities. So I think to go back to, let's say, the initial driver from our point of view is obviously from the point of view of what remote work offers. And then we're working very closely with the department and the minister in providing the infrastructure. In other words, how to provide places where people can work remotely. But we see that establishment of the network as the starting point. And what excites me most is what can we then use that network to provide, both to provide to communities, and I think it would be really interesting in the context of some of these working groups to hear what services might be provided through these hubs, because I see these as centres of activity that more broadly tie in with the huge amount of other government policy in terms of saying that we need compact development. So we need people being within reach of each other. The idea that certain sectors work well in the remote work setting, but that when you bring a hub like this into a rural town or village, it's a matter of people go to the pub for their lunch, they get their hair done, they go and bring their car to the mechanic. So there's this spillover effect where lots of other things drive it. But finally, I think the most important thing perhaps is this will allow a voice for communities. So one of the challenges we have in the West is that we don't have big urban centres or few urban centres. So what very often you lack is critical mass. In other words, where you have a huge number of people and services and everything together. And we see the development of this network, I think, as Laura has pointed out, bringing people together that maybe don't have any connection on the face of it, but yet once you bring them together, there's huge power in that. So I think as a network, nationally connected hubs can be the voice of all these rural and regional areas and can speak with one voice and can really inform an awful lot of what's happening. And I think that goes back to taking advantage of some of the employment opportunities that are there, addressing issues around training, but also then leading communities to develop other things. And particularly, and finally, I think the biggest single saving, both in an anecdotal way and some of the data that we've gathered points to this, is time. So in terms of the work-life balance, people have an extra hour in the morning or in the evening, and that actually can have a huge impact at a community level and at a society level. So if we gather up all this extra time, what does that allow people to do? Individually, it might allow them to do further study or spend more time with their family. at a community level, it might allow them to, you know, let's say put more time into a club or society that they're involved with. But then at a society level, if we think, let's say in the context of the coming carbon budget, if we can save all that saved time, saved travel, saved energy, then all of these things cumulatively can actually make a huge difference. And I think that's what really excites me about the opportunities ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing that in. So not only is it going to having an impact on each of us individually, but actually the community benefit, the societal benefit that can come from that is really something not to be disregarded. Thank you, Tomas. We'll continue around again. Hazel, how about for you? You may have seen this with colleagues, with others. Yeah, how do we move through this, the changes that are coming up for each of us?
Yeah, look, I think the honest answer is nobody has all the answers. I think we know today that the working world has changed forever, and unless an employee wants to, 9 to 5 in the office just won't be the norm going forward, I think. So I think back to the point of choice and flexibility, you know, that helps, I think, promote a better employee well-being. And I think that is part of being part of your community, being able to spend more time with your family, spending less time commuting in your car. That all drives a greater work-life balance. And from an employer perspective, the benefits are very clear, right? So that helps somebody be happier in their work-life balance, helps them be happier in their work. So like, I think we really have to think about how we empower our employees and our teams to make their own decisions and to find solutions that work for them. And again, I think really listening to the employees is key, trying different things, figuring out what isn't working, and no one has all the answers. So I think really working with other groups and other companies and learning from what's working well in some areas, what's not, and just bringing your team on the journey with you, and just being clear and constant communication, because I think that transparency is important. Because I know I mentioned earlier, but what solves for one person just doesn't solve for another person. So it's just making sure that you're transparent about what you can do, what you're in a position to do, and bringing people along with you, I think is vital.
Thank you, Hazel. Yeah, just getting in a way, it's like every one of us is also unique and different, so our leadership approach to that has to be to honor that. So maybe, moving on to you, Trish, what have you seen, this kind of sense of how we're readdressing our lives, given everything we've gone through? How have you seen that show up?
Yeah, well, I suppose as a social enterprise who are there for the benefit really of the community and the people working and living in it, we need to look at sustainability and flexibility. And the reason why is because we don't want these buildings left with expensive equipment in it and sitting empty. We have to be flexible, and we need to sustain our future. And we've decided to do that, I know, in Uncree by looking at podcast facilities. We have an event space, which, unfortunately hasn't been used for the past 20 months, but we have, and it's just that flexibility to offer a variety of spaces, both to people in the community, whether they're in community groups or business or individuals. And we're offering that flexibility by way of, you can come into the building, you can use it for an hour, a week, a month, and you can use our event space. We're running educational programs, or we will be once we're up and running. We'll be able to run various seminars. And so we're ever changing. And that's the way I see our sustainable future for hubs such as ourselves. We also get involved in projects. We've actually been involved in one with Sligo at the moment, Sligo IT, and that's an e-invoicing project, which has been really, really interesting. But again, it's engaged us with the local community. It's called e-invoicing for communities, and it's been a wonderful way to kind of disseminate the information throughout the community. Because I can honestly say I'm a local person, and I knew of Uncree, but I didn't really understand the concept behind it. So we used it for group meetings, for community group meetings, and the idea of remote working was there, but I don't think that message is fully disseminated down into the individual homes just yet. And I'm looking forward to spreading that message.
Wow, this is really exciting, Trish. I have to say, I was actually thinking that when Tomas was also talking about the kind of the community benefit of all the saved commuting time and being more in the community. And I was thinking this wonderful workspace here, it's for small organizations and individual workers and for artists. and for the community. And I was thinking, in a way, I have more connection to local community members and to other artists than I did when I used to be an employee in a single organization and just go into that building. So yeah, there's so much possibility from that.
I'm hoping maybe that we can be seen as community builders, so to speak, you know, and that we get on board with ensuring that we are speaking to organizations and individuals within the business community, and we can certainly do that. There's no reason why we can't do that as a hub manager in an enterprise centre. We don't have to be closed off as such.
Yeah, God, that's an inspiring vision. Thank you, Trish. So Laura, how about for you then? What have you picked up in terms of the way we're each responding?
I was asked, sorry, after our event the other week, one of the remote workers got back to me and said, would there be a possibility of setting up a sports and social club for remote workers? So we're toying with that idea of doing that in Gort, maybe piloting it here, and then kind of run events around Ireland and have it open to remote workers in that area. I thought that was a really good idea. They were saying that they pay into their local, they pay into their own organisation, sports and social club, but there's not many events going on. So people are keen to get back out there and mix with other people, not just the people they work with.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks, Laura. And I was actually thinking the changes of this time has also shown us like the things that were implicitly there in our working lives around just communing with our own colleagues or peers that have been removed. And I was feeling like we need to bring them back in, you know, as well as our actual business meetings. We need to make sure that there really is space where we share food together, where we join together or play sports together, as you were saying. So yeah, so just, I actually think I've got just the last couple of questions, and I'm thinking I might just reverse the order, but come right back to you, Laura, just to give you a space, and we'll go back around the circle in a different direction, which is just thinking this is all, I'm personally feeling very inspired. I've got a real stake in this, I'm passionate about this, and to hear about it. But we do have a question around, you know, is everyone ready for this? Are employers ready for hybrid working? Are employees ready for it? Or are there cases, you know, can you sense where there might be resistances, dragging of feet, or difficulties, challenges? And what might they be, or how would you meet that? So yeah, Laura, what would you say to that?
There's definitely challenges, especially with the technology that's moving so fast. So what we did here is I applied to innovate together with Rethink Ireland, and we got a grant to run the Grow Remote Working Skills course. We had 25 people signing up to it. Everybody's heard about remote working, but a lot of people don't actually know how it works properly. And they don't know the different tools that you use as a remote worker, like Notion, Monday.com, Slack channels, and how to tailor your CV to apply for remote jobs. So there is a lot of learning there, and I'm concerned that people might just get left behind. The younger people seem to be adapting quicker, but you know, there's a lot of the people that were on our course, they lacked confidence, but by doing the course, they gained the confidence, and they were able to apply. So I would see that as the main concern, really.
Thanks so much, Laura. This really expands on, I think you brought this up right at the beginning about the need for training. You know, we are moving into new modes of operating, and there really needs some training and support for that. How about you, Trish? Is everyone ready? Or if not, how can we help?
I definitely think there are a lot of conversations that need to start, if they're not starting already, between the employee and the employer. I think companies need to look at their policies. They really need to look at their culture and what they want to promote. And if they want to attract the right staff as well, they need to be able to offer the benefit of remote working, hybrid working, you know, even looking at maybe an allowance for using a hub. You know, even if it was only 2 days a month, something like that, you know, could be of benefit and would aid, but they need to have conversations. I mean, we have clients in the building pre-COVID, and they've obviously had those conversations with their employers. We have an insurance company, we have a legal advisor, and they've obviously been successful. So I think we'd be more than happy to help facilitate any of those conversations between an employee and an employer, and show them and give them the experience of using a hub, which might sway their argument a little better.
Wow, that's a great idea. So actually, in a way, a hub leader like you could actually even help with that shift towards a more hybrid way of working. How about for you, Hazel? Any ways where you see sort of blockers or barriers showing up?
Yeah, look, I think a lot more people know today what remote working is than would have known a number of years ago. I mean, we certainly would have had a challenge. People actually didn't think remote jobs were real jobs. So that was some guidance. We did a roadshow and people said, is it a real job? And, you know, we really had to explain, yes, it is. And there's opportunity to develop and grow your career, etc. And obviously that's changed in the last couple of years, thankfully. And I think the pandemic has given us the great opportunity to be agile and move really quickly. And it's, you know, it's forced us, I think, to think differently, which has been phenomenal. But there are still, to Laura's point, there are still people who need help and support and the right training and the right confidence to go for those roles. And I do think transparency is important. They need to understand, especially if they're working from home, what does that mean? What sort of space do they need? What does it mean for their family? Because we know there have been challenges for people where their family need to understand that somebody is working from home, etc. So I think it is important that we put the right support mechanisms in place. And again, the right listening posts, that we hear people's concerns, we check in, because not everyone's having the same challenges, and that we really try and, you know, learn from what's working for people. What are those barriers and how do we avoid them? And then I think as employers, there's a lot to learn, right? So there's a number of people that will help and support. We were very lucky from an eBay perspective that last month we joined the Remote Alliance, which is an initiative kicked off by Grow Remote, which I think is going to be really fundamental. We were delighted to be able to be a founding member, and I think that's a huge opportunity for us to come together and share best practices and learnings, and also just work through what are those challenges and how do we fix them together, and how do we make sure we have a consistent experience for the remote workers of Ireland. So there are those support mechanisms. We just need to make sure that they're visible and that we're agile enough to learn from them as we hear those challenges, and that we move quickly to address the challenges that we face.
Thanks, Hazel. So I can hear it's almost like there's a two-part. It's both checking in, whether it's with our own employees or colleagues or with peer organisations, and then being willing to act on that and act on what we hear. But I've no doubt that will, given the previous experience that you've already demonstrated, this is going to just continue to roll. It's exciting. And so how about for you, Tomas? Any of sort of things you picked up about where perhaps people are not so ready and how we help with that?
Well, I unmute myself, one of the immediate things is somebody will invent a magical unmute button, but that's perhaps for a later time. But one of the key things I think is, Hazel has touched on it there. I think the work that Grow Remote has done in bringing the Remote Alliance together is very good, because that will see, people will then understand that big companies are making this work. I think obviously the public sector have signaled an intention to move. What I'm really conscious of, and which I think is really important in the context of rural and regional development, are small and medium enterprises, because very often where you have significant change in a situation like this, you know, you're dealing with companies that are absolutely focused on getting to the end of the month, particularly after the pandemic. So their focus is on making ends meet. Similarly, the other aspect of it is they don't have necessarily, you know, dedicated HR officers or other specialist kind of areas of knowledge, or maybe IT managers that really are vital in terms of managing both the human side of this and the technological side of this and all that change. So I think they're a group that we really need to work with and support as we go through it. Now, on the flip side, I think one of the challenges, and this has been documented extensively both at a national level and by the OECD, is the opportunities for SMEs to innovate. And one of the ways that the Hub Network can work is by bringing them all together and making them aware of what's happening in their sector in different parts of the country. Going back again to the idea of, you know, bringing different parts of this network together for critical mass. But I think finally the key thing from an individual point of view, and one of the changes that I've seen, but I think is really important again in the SME sector, is, you know, the advantage of being able to get a new job while working remotely means that you can also build a career. And I think that's a big shift, because it means that people are not solely focused on moving with this job, or I'm in this job and I can work remotely because I have an arrangement with my boss in this situation. The importance of the work that the government are doing in terms of enshrining that right and making it, you know, setting it out in law means that, you know, this is a right that you would be able to bring with you into your next role. And that means that, you know, it would allow people to not only get the next job but build a career. And the final point I would make, and I think anyone that's been listening to Trish earlier on will see immediately the benefit of having somebody dynamic and engaged in that role. The hub manager role is really, really important. And I see some references to that in the chat as well. I think what we need to do is to make sure that that's sustainable, because ultimately the way that this will work best is if each of these hubs is a sustainable entity in its own right. And that will mean looking at other opportunities to make ends meet and make it sustainable. But where the hub is a success, I think that is almost always driven by, first of all, a dynamic and engaged hub manager, but equally part of a broader community of support, whether it's those that are based in the hub or those around the hub, other kind of social and support groups that are working with it to make sure that the hub is a manager. So I think all of those are some of the challenges that are there, but I think within each one of those, there's certainly opportunity as well.
Thank you, Tomas. Yeah, I saw that. I mean, all this is making me think is just, in a sense, the way remote working could seem to be pushing us to be more separate. In fact, is almost because we need it, drawing us together. Everything I'm hearing in each of you saying is the connections and obviously the great work and leadership of collectors like Bro Remote and others, but we're actually, in a sense, we seem to be connecting more and more broadly with peers, with other organizations, kind of pushed by these times and by necessity, but that's really something to celebrate. And yeah, I was thinking even, I wish all hubs could have a manager and a manager like Trish, but you know, there is also just the other regulars, the people in the space. There often is a lot of connection that can happen. I absolutely love chatting to the caretaker of our space, who's an incredibly warm individual. It's one of the highlights of my days when I get to come into work. So I think these can be great community spaces. So I had a final thing to ask as we bring our panel to an end, and we've not got so much time now, so maybe just a brief point, because we want to now move into hearing from all of you gathered here as well. But as you'll have heard from the Minister, from St. John, really, this is also one of our big focuses here, and that's going to support all of these developments, is our National Hub Network. And that's roaring ahead in its development, but it's going to continue to unfold. So maybe just one wish from each of you. If you had one wish for how you see the National Hub Network developing as it goes forward, what's one point that you would make around that? And just again, we'll start with Laura and come back round to you, Tomas, as the final person. So Laura, anything just to end with in terms of the National Hub Network? Oh, just say you're on mute, Laura, still. Yeah.
Yes, it's vital for Ireland, and especially for rural Ireland. We need to have these facilities so people have the choice. At least, you know, by having the facilities, you have choice. And I think the future is very bright for our young people coming up as well. They can go to college knowing that they have a local job back in they don't have to move countries, even though they probably will at this stage, but they'll always come back knowing that there's a job here for them in rural Ireland.
Thank you, Laura. And Trish?
I have to say my wish is to keep the National Hub Network going. We need to secure funding for managers within these hubs. And so there's fantastic funding out there, typically for capital works, for startup or for the expansion of an organization. But we really, really need to ensure that these buildings have salaried managers, you know, just to keep going. And there's nothing to say that with the way smart technology is that you couldn't remotely manage a number of hubs in an area. I think I spoke to Sneem Hub, and I think they manage 3 hubs, one of which they're based in, and 2 which, you know, are essentially run from your mobile phone, and they can obviously travel to, but it's a fantastic concept. So, you know, I think we really, really need to address that seriously. Yeah.
Thank you, Trish. That's helping us solve the issue of the hub manager. Let's have a hub manager over a number, and why not? So over to you, Hazel. Any last wish for the National Hub Network?
No, I mean, look, it's still something I'm learning a little about. We certainly were supported. We, as I mentioned, we had a roadshow a number of years ago, and we were supported by some of the hubs, and they enabled our roadshow and gave us great advice. So for me, I think it's all about connection. It's about creating that community. It's about, you know, creating that opportunity for people to come together and to find a space that works for them. So it's great to watch it, I think, and see it grow, hopefully, just from strength to strength, and hopefully we can help support as we go forward in terms of, you know, just at least learning about it and understanding what that looks like and how the community can leverage it. I think whatever we can do to help there as community members is key as we go forward.
Yeah, thanks, Hazel. We all have a stake in this network one way or another. We all have a great interest in it. So finally to you, Tomas, obviously you're very much involved in it, but a last statement just on the hub network as it goes forward?
No, I think the key thing has been touched on by a number of different people. I think sustainability is the biggest issue in two contexts. So first of all, that the hubs are sustainable as entities in themselves, but I think more broadly that they can be the leaders in terms of an awful lot of what we're talking about. So how would we use the hubs platform as we look at the kind of transition to a low carbon economy? They're some of the biggest changes that we're going to experience as an economy in a short period of time, and it'll be a matter of bringing all hands on deck. So I think that at a kind of a broad level, but equally some of the kind of individual and minor points, or not necessarily minor, but granular points, issues around hub managers. Let's say, as Hazel mentioned there, for bigger companies, one of the things we put in place is collective billing. So are there just identifiable issues like that perhaps we could even deal with in the short term? Blockages that either communities, hub managers themselves, companies big or small would see that we can help with. And I think that would be really, really helpful from our point of view in terms of identifying those issues, and then we can begin to work on them.
Great, thank you, Tomas. So thank you so much to all of you. I'm going to bring our panel discussion to a close. I just see lots of reflections starting to come through in the chat. Support for paid managers to deliver this incredible vision as Trish brought it out, and also lots of interest in your course, Laura. Oh, great. I can see you've responded there. So yeah, if you could respond directly, and something was shared in the chat on that as well. Incredible just to hear the amazing Agile experience that you've led, Hazel and eBay, and to hear from you, Tomas, really kind of leading the way for us, both there in the west of Ireland, but across the country. So with that, I thank all of our panel members, and I'll bring our panel to a close. Thank you so much.